How's it going, everyone? My name's Graham and welcome to Two Left Frames. After having recently done an exhaustive review of that 1995 live-action Mortal Kombat movie, I was so excited for the 2021 reboot. I've literally been anticipating this movie for 20 years, following every little scrap of news while it wandered its way through development hell. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this. That original movie proved that campy, good-humored fun can still make for a fantastic action martial arts movie. Annihilation proved that there needs to be a balance for that to work. Too campy, too silly, and the whole thing falls apart. That's not really something I can compare directly here, since this movie is obviously taking things in a more serious and epic direction. I generally kind of hate that word, but it's obvious they wanted more of a grandiose blockbuster feel here. And yeah, that definitely reads as epic. A world that insists on having a grand scale, and while this movie shows restraint in this regard, is obviously pursuing some form of cinematic universe. There's some sequel bait, but not as bad as you might think. Based on the trailers with lots of those fantastical shots, I thought they were going to play up that epic aspect a bit too much and really overreach, but I was pleasantly surprised that it doesn't become too much of a focus, and certainly isn't what holds this movie back. Because yeah, the movie is generally held back. So we can't compare the two movies tonally, with one being a hard R-rated gore fest targeted at adults, and the other more of a light-hearted romp about teamwork. Living up to that original movie will instead come down to how well this new version adapts the story and characters of Mortal Kombat. The portrayal of those characters, which was a standout aspect of the original film, and packing the movie to the brim with fight scenes. While I have a very obvious bias here, having just made that 45-minute long video about my love for the 1995 movie, at the end of the day, what I care about is a quality, enjoyable fighting game adaptation of a series I love. And I believe I can observe this movie in isolation of that original. I've witnessed who knows how many Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, and more, and have learned to love and hate those all independent from what came before. So I imagine I can do that again for mystical ninjas. I can't help but share the occasional moment or character that I thought one movie handled better, but I want that to really be viewed as pros for the successful movie, not a con for the other. If that makes sense. Like, this new movie has way better CGI, but you know, the original movie was made in '95. They did what they could. I think some of the banter is better in that original movie, but the movie kind of bordered on a comedy. That's not what they were going for here. So while I have preferences, I'll try not to knock it against the 2021 reboot. If you're one of the dedicated superfans watching both of my Mortal Kombat movie reviews, first of all, I love you, thank you. And second, for your sake, I will format this one in the same way, analyzing both the movie as a whole, how successful it is as a video game adaptation, and maintaining the three categories I used previously. Game essence, the story, characters, and gameplay, how much the movie feels like the game itself, largely through fighting. A unique world, highlighted through production design. Do I feel like I'm inhabiting and learning more about that game world? The different locations, the characters, the factions, their motivations, how it all fits together. And the overall effectiveness. Comedy, pacing, story, character arcs, and kind of generally, am I having a good time while I'm along for the ride? And you know, at this point, fair warning, very spoiler-heavy review. I'm basically analyzing every frame of this movie to some extent, so if you don't want things spoiled, now would probably be a good time to turn around. Opening up with game essence. How well does Mortal Kombat capture the essence of the game it's adapting? Part of that game essence is how it adapts the storyline of those games, how it brings it all together, and in what way does it make you feel like you're truly experiencing a Mortal Kombat storyline. This movie actually chose to do things a little different. Rather than adapting a straight storyline from one of the games, it chose to shake things up a little, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't need the literal tournament as long as we stay true to the series. The combat is what matters, not the structure that surrounds the combat. We have a familiar setup, with Outworld having claimed 9 victories and are one away from gaining full control of Earthrealm. The critical change here is that Outworld is jumping the gun here, said forget the rules, and are working to kill all of Earthrealm's champions ahead of the 10th Mortal Kombat tournament. Honestly, I kinda love this. It's a good way to distinguish itself from that previous adaptation. It's new yet familiar, and you know, they're villains. Cheating is kind of their thing. So now we can expect awesome fights to break out anywhere, at any time. That all sounds great, except it doesn't quite play out like that. Easily the best thing about this movie, and I'm almost certain nobody will disagree with me here, is the Sub-Zero vs. Scorpion B-plot that occupies the first 12 minutes of the movie and pays off during the climax towards the end. That opening scene is so beautifully shot, captivating, tragic, and easily the best fighting and acting of the whole movie. Those two scenes are quite possibly the best video game adaptation ever made. Forget about the rest of the movie. Even in the moments where the movie is otherwise successful, nothing else here really stands up to the Hanzo-Bi-Han rivalry. If you are at all a Mortal Kombat fan, it's totally worth seeing this movie for that alone. And there's some half-decent stuff sandwiched in between it, but man is it clear that everyone involved cared so much more about these characters and this story, and it really makes me wish that they just had the entire movie set back in that time period and showed this rivalry play out in full. The movie could have ended at this point and been an awesome setup for this scene in the sequel. That's just what I would have preferred to have seen. There's a reason all the marketing for all these games pretty well exclusively focuses on these two characters. That's what people want to see. Instead, for the rest of the movie, we have a non-game character, Cole Young, as our protagonist. He is one of several chosen ones around the world who have this dragon-shaped birthmark that marks him as one of Earthrealm's champions. Except they then totally botch this storyline by having a bunch of chosen ones, with it then being possible to instead steal someone's mark by defeating them in combat. So everyone with a mark is chosen, except for most of them, because Cole is the only one who is born with a mark. So now the whole thing is incredibly stupid, cliche, and meaningless. I guess it shows that, you earned your place, but isn't that a bad thing to incentivize the good guys to kill each other? Why? After getting attacked by Sub-Zero publicly, which, is not much of anything, the effects look really cool, and oh man, there's some amazing moments that really pull from these, horror movie influences. Sub-Zero just kind of teleports out of the scene in a vapor, getting sucked out of things and reappearing like a force of nature. The way they handled that is awesome. And then the scene quickly turns into what everyone loves about the Mortal Kombat series, a car chase.
Keep the truck on!
Punching, kicking, using magic against each other? No. Just get in your Hummer or whatever it is and drive away. Through all this, Cole is swept up in this underground world spearheaded by Jax and Sonya, who have been thoroughly researching this and seeking others who have the tattoo. They've also captured Kano, he's being reluctantly dragged around, and somehow they literally figure out everything and are able to provide some very handy exposition. I guess we're moving things along quickly without getting hung up on overly explaining it all, so there's a net balance of pros and cons there. But when they go to learn more, Liu Kang is all thanks for showing up, guys. What if none of them ever took it upon themselves to look into this? Cole didn't have a clue until 5 minutes ago. If this all mattered so much, why didn't Raiden or anyone else work to actually recruit any of them like he usually would? How did Liu Kang and Kung Lao become a part of this? Did he go and let them know? Did they figure it out and tell no one else? They keep this plot so simple, yet it somehow barely functions, and doesn't hold up to any scrutiny. I'm okay with silly, shortcut-based fantasy explanations for things, but I'd prefer the writers worked a little harder than this. So the story has some high highs, very frustrating low lows. Maybe you couldn't care less about the story, and all you want is to see the punching and kicking. I hear you. And while there are some cool fights on display, it really isn't at all what the movie could have or should have been. One of the highlights of the 1995 movie is that literally half of the runtime is spent fighting. It often chains together fights, with no exposition in between, and none is needed. I had said that I would worry about this new one if there was much less fighting than that. And well, the runtime is 70% of what I'm calling story, 9% of that is credits, 14% is training, and that leaves us with a relatively dismal 26% spent fighting. Yeah, I calculated it. I mean, if you want to count the training, that's 40%, and that looks a little better on paper, but as I'm about to describe, the training stuff is really just uninteresting. One aspect that this movie scores huge bonus points on is the commitment shown to adapting fighting styles, special moves, and especially the fatalities from the Mortal Kombat video games. There was clearly so much love and care put into translating that into this movie, rather than the occasional insert of, a Liu Kang bicycle kick or the Johnny Cage groin punch, which were satisfying and fun previously. Now every fight scene is largely built around almost nothing but recognizable moves. That's super dope, and you'll end up looking like this through the majority of every fight scene. That aspect is wonderful to see, and they absolutely deserve credit for that. The funniest part of this entire movie was Liu Kang spamming his leg sweep move against Kano. That's gold. but it's a shame that the fights as a whole really aren't very strong. I'm going to break them down one at a time in order. That opening fight scene is something else. I'll save that for you, because it's absolutely worth seeing, probably the highlight of the whole movie. I have no clue how Hiroyuki Sanada is still so agile at 60 years old. I was a little worried when I saw his age in the casting. Not at all a problem. Holy crap. And Joe Taslim is 20 years younger and famously needs to slow down his fight choreography for the sake of the camera and his scene partners. So you better believe he brings it as well.
Joe is so fast, they had to ask him to slow it down for the camera. It was like 2 guys that's ever happened to. Joe Taslim and Bruce Lee.
You should really watch that one in full. Cole Young is an MMA fighter, which actually makes a lot of sense for a modern Mortal Kombat movie. Too bad everyone is a bunch of superpowered ninjas and demons, so he can literally never use those skills in a single fight. I guess it establishes why he's a capable fighter at all, but in this opening little match he loses, it kind of fails to even show like that he's willing to do everything or like, letting himself get choked out or anything. So yeah, it's basically a waste of a scene. It functionally taught us he was a fighter, but failed to add anything to the character, as the entire movie kind of fails to do. At least that big car chase ends with Jax getting out and deciding to face Sub-Zero head on. And this fight is the first real showdown we have in the movie, aside from that prologue. And while it's another awesome showcase of how goddamn fast Taslim is and how jacked Jax is, it's quickly apparent that they simply cannot film this fight in the same way as that opening because these two actors are nowhere near the same skill level. We have the much more familiar action filmmaking style of quick cuts and a bunch of close-ups. They have a few impactful moments. I think it's probably one of the stronger fights in the movie, even if it is relatively short. And I mean, come on, I kind of love this fight because of moments like that icy backhand. Or Jax just being a total badass.
Done 6 tours, motherfucker.
But it's a recalibration, cooling that initial hype and realizing the fights in this movie are not going to all be a spectacle. It's brutal, but my jaw was no longer on the floor. Reptile attacks Cole, Sonya, and Kano at their secret base. Fighting a monster who turns invisible is pretty cool, and I was genuinely impressed by the CGI. This movie didn't have the biggest budget, and they did really well with that. I have a personal preference for the more humanoid, ninja-esque version of Reptile, but this iteration is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, this is where the cracks really start to show, and the movie completely loses its ability to make claims like having some of the best fight scenes ever filmed. This is such an incomprehensible mess. There are confusing, rapid cuts all over the place. Nothing has an ounce of impact as it cuts at the exact moment a punch would have landed, bouncing the camera around in a way that makes the action impossible to follow, making utterly confusing choices like this armpit shot from Reptile's perspective. At one point, Reptile just kind of flails around and disappears off screen, and I guess Sonya got hit in the stomach, but it doesn't really show that. Sonya does this weird spinny move that becomes a bit of a staple of this movie. Characters constantly do this useless performative spin all the time, and it looks awful every time. Okay, I know a fight is going to be tough against a CG character, but that was your choice. You now have to make it work. And without strong direction or fight choreo to back that up, half the attacks from Reptile look like they land a mile away from anyone's face. And here's the trick this movie uses numerous times to trick you into thinking you just watched an incredible fight. Random chaotic action happens, pretty standard action movie fare, ending with a gratuitous moment of gore that makes you jump up and down in excitement and really puts a cap on the whole thing. It gives these moments the focus and attention to really make sure they pop. And the fact that I feel so jazzed in that moment kind of made me forget that the rest of the fight had nowhere near that care and attention. So when you walk out of this movie, you're going to remember individual fights and big flashy moments, and probably on a rewatch, realize there's just not much meat to any of it. My concern was beginning to build. That was just because it was a CGI fight, right? Right? Wrong. We have this mini showdown between Sonya and Kano in the desert. This one works to highlight why every actor probably should have been a fighter or stunt person first. It is infinite quick cuts, and it comes across so bland and fake. Like, why did it take 8 cuts for Sonya to throw Kano and put a knife to his neck? The 1995 movie may have overly relied on slow motion and other flashy gimmicks for its fights, but I would prefer that careful pacing and impactful fighting to whatever the hell this is. Sub-Zero shows up to raid the temple. Yes, we're getting things back on track. This is gonna be good. Nah, Kung Lao has a super badass entrance that I could watch on repeat 1,000 more times. Then everyone decides not to fight instead. And now we enter the training montage portion of the movie, where not a single fight that takes place matters or has any stakes whatsoever. There is the occasional cool move, and I guess it's an excuse to see characters who wouldn't normally go toe-to-toe duke it out, but it's all lifeless and boring, and it all takes place in one generic setting. Remember when I said 14% of the movie is this? Yeah, it gets old quickly. I don't care about any of it. After this portion, the action of the movie really starts to build up. There becomes a greater emphasis on fighting, and we have all sorts of showdowns. And each one of these fights had really awesome potential. Cabal versus Liu Kang especially. I have never cared about Cabal one bit. I thought he was totally lame, like maybe among some of the stupidest characters in Mortal Kombat. But the way they translated his fighting style here was perfect. Like, it was so awesome to see on screen, to the point that as soon as the movie was over, me and my brother booted up Mortal Kombat 11 and just played a few rounds as Cabal, just to give him a chance for once. Jax is fighting this big hammer dude whose name I forget. He's a part of Mortal Kombat lore, but he's not important at all. That fight barely counts for anything. And Kung Lao fights Natara, who has appeared in, like 3 games. Clearly these characters only existed to die, Suicide Squad style. So this is it, huh? We some kind of Mortal Kombat?
I got a better idea. How about you get on your knees and take turns sucking my sack?
But the fights just feel meaningless because of it. The Kung Lao one, again, capped with an incredible fatality that makes it feel more hardcore than any of it actually was. Jax eventually, gets proper arms and has a rematch with this guy. But look at this hammer dummy. What a joke of a character. Dodoy. It looks like he's doing slapstick comedy. The Melina and Sonya matchup exists entirely for this shot to be included in the trailer, and Cole versus Goro feels like a total waste. I saw someone mention that they should have saved Goro and made this fight versus Baraka. That would have been so great. It still would have had that impactful what the fuck is going on feeling by having this vicious Tarkatan with his crazy sword arms. If anything, Goro being Outworld's champion and showing up for this little cheat fest feels beneath him, and it totally robs us of any opportunity to make Goro a real character. Then we could have included some actual brawling, maybe an opportunity for Cole to do some MMA grappling and fighting, and have 2 characters with sword arm type weapons fighting. That would have been so much better. And for some reason, during all this, they took a page out of Annihilation's book and edited the fights together in this quick cut style where none of them are given any real emphasis. And I have to assume they did it to mask the fact that most of these are again actors, not fighters. It mostly just blurs everything together. Once again, you'll remember the big moments, but it was all just a bunch of nothing. Kung Lao, one of the standout best characters in the movie, then gets killed in a non-fight where everyone stands around and watches as he slowly has the soul drained out of him. It looks cool. Maybe everyone was just in awe of that. Followed by Raiden teleporting them all to Cloud World or whatever. It's all paid so little mind that I could barely bring myself to care. Where the movie then switches to this Guy Ritchie format, where Cole starts talking about the upcoming fights as they show them. Like, what is this sudden pace and style change? And so we're immediately getting all of these rematches now? Like, instantly afterwards? Why did this movie not have those original fights taking place sooner, each done in a way where they were given their own little bit of focus, maybe happening around the world? Raiden realizes Outworld is cheating, assembles everyone sooner than he originally thought he would have to, puts them through this rapid, intense training, and then have all the rematches take place. Does that not make infinite more sense? Oh, that's just frustrating. The first of these is Sonya versus Kano. It's notably better than their first matchup, and also better than Sonya versus Melina. It's a decent fight. I'm a little suspicious Kano isn't permanently dead, especially since this character was such a fan favorite. They'll probably use this as an excuse to give him the metal eye. Yeah, that was fine. Just when Liu Kang versus Cabal was getting good, I was totally on board for that speedster action, and just like that, they dunk him in some oil and perform a fatality. Again, that looks cool, very unsatisfying, and just kind of sudden. There's the rematch against Hammer Guy, but I mean, I say rematch. It's like 10 seconds long and exists entirely just to show this cool Jax fatality with zero buildup. So yeah, it makes sense why they made that character such a meatball. But like, how did they even get out to this crazy environment they're fighting? Like, what is going on? Cole versus Sub-Zero is again pretty much a non-fight because Sub-Zero was clearly stronger than everyone else. Luckily, we get the payoff of Scorpion returning to finish the job.
Get over here!
His line upon returning is the most hardcore shit I've ever heard. I'm still geeking out over that specifically 2 weeks later. This fight totally lives up to that opening scene. There's even more cool powers on display straight from the games, and it really underlines how pathetic every other fight in the movie actually was. So again, the moves on display and respect to the source material was all really amazing. I loved seeing all that. It's too bad that this movie only really has 2 good fights in it. And upon rewatching, I was so hyper aware of how broken the editing is throughout. Not just to hide actors pretending to fight, but with bad direction, confusing edits loaded with broken continuity, and choices that often act to completely suck all the life out of those blows. There were some decent game quotes sprinkled throughout to varying degrees of success.
Fatality. For come now.
I'm like 50-50 on them.
All you can do now is test your might.
I don't really like the idea of characters announcing their wins and successes in the third person.
Kinda wins.
Like,
flawless victory.
just why would they do that? You know, I'm still excited for the sequel, especially if they give us more fights like this. And apparently Joe Taslim wants them to make a Sub-Zero origin story, which, like I've said, that probably should have just been what this movie was. That would have been more bankable and built more hype for a long-term franchise. Right now, I'm kind of worried they're going to make 2 movies and it's going to fizzle out. Without a dramatic change in the formula they've established here, that's kind of the trajectory I think they're on. I really hope McCoy learned a few things from making this movie and can bring that to the sequel. So how about production design? Grouping in a few other movie-making elements. I raved about the amazing sets and unique feel of that 1995 movie. It is just so wholly its own thing. My brother even showed me the way the crypt in Mortal Kombat 11 has clearly been influenced all these years later. Those bold colors, craggy environments, creepy statues, and corrupted temple style are all iconic. The reboot opens with what is by far its most beautiful set. I mean, maybe this sort of foggy forest is a cheat code, the way The Revenant won Best Cinematography. If you just kind of film in a beautiful location, it's gonna look amazing. But it's yet again another way in which this opening scene is just the best part of the movie. Most of it takes place on Earth for the majority of the runtime. But it doesn't offer up anything anywhere near as cool as the Shaolin Temple, those eerie docks, the haunted boat, or this gorgeous beach, which, technically wasn't Earth anymore, but it's a very Earth-like setting. A lot of that is simply a stylistic separation, and while a real-world setting is just going to be less exciting, it doesn't inherently make this movie's sets bad or wrong. It's only comparatively underwhelming when looking at something that chose to be so stylistic. So, all these cityscapes are serviceable, it's nothing to write home about. We spend half the movie in this sandy-looking cave that the characters just kind of teleport to and from like 6 times. And within that, this open fighting pit that is nothing special. The more I look at it, the more it feels like a set, rather than a cool, natural cave setting. But that's only when I'm scrutinizing extra hard. I don't think it felt off or distracting on that first watch. For like half a second, Jax is on this bridge that looks like an arena straight from the games. I would have loved to have seen more of that specific setting and more crazy set pieces like it. And the final fight in Mr. Freeze's lair is pretty neato. Every other setting is just a generic house or city. I guess the warehouse fight setting was pretty good. It's hard to care about any of that. It also seems like Cole lives out on like a farm or an acreage, whereas he clearly is fighting within a city. If that was specifically established, not well enough for me to care. We get glimpses of that world. It's usually wide open, gravelly nothingness. It makes me wonder if they planned to CGI more into the background and kind of ran out of budget. At one point, we see a big Goro statue that was vaguely cool, and eventually a much cooler Shao Kahn statue, but it's not littered throughout in a way that's really distinct or captivating. And this bridged throne area feels a hair more distinct than the rest, but it's kind of like, what is it a bridge from and to where? It's just out in the middle of this weird nothingness. From what we see of Outworld, none of it feels that significant or much different from the desert our heroes walk through on Earth. It's just kind of like a cloudy day in the Badlands. Did they maybe mean to include more of this? Partially with the CGI, but why else include this scene where Shang Tsung and Melina are walking all covered in dirt like they just came from somewhere important or doing something interesting? It's too bad, because we definitely needed to see a bit more of these characters and a bit more of this setting. I didn't expect much from this portion of the remake. Any attempt to recreate what came before likely would have felt forced and probably out of place in this grittier telling of the story. So what they did here gets a tentative thumbs up from me, maybe like a sideways thumb. I hope we have more settings like that opening scene, or this straight from the game bridge showdown in a possible sequel. Fingers crossed they get a bit bigger of a budget and can do some more interesting things with it. Something I will tag into this section as a part of overall movie feel and realizing of that game world are the costumes and overall character designs. I think Sub-Zero's mask is a little ill-fitting and kind of bulky. I don't really know what's up with that, especially when Scorpion's looked so good. And it's hard to say anything about Cole when he doesn't have any sort of in-game basis, so his generic outfit is fine. I think his eventual armor looks really stupid, but literally every other costume is unreal. Characters like Sonya, Kano, and Jax all look solid. Those are well done adaptations. You know, you're not given a lot to work with, so those are good. I liked them. Reimagining Kano's messed up eye was a cool touch, but characters like Kung Lao, Raiden, Cabal, Scorpion, Shang Tsung are all incredible. It's actually so well done that I almost forgot to talk about it in this video. Like, they're so damn flawless and well realized that it felt like it went without saying how high caliber they were. But really, with how often studios decide they want to tweak and update things and make it cooler or more realistic, it's so often lost in translation, and so it's really worth acknowledging their dedication to making it authentic to the games, and on occasion updating it in a way that still felt really well suited to this franchise. So, costume department, you guys are the real MVPs of this movie, because that more than anything else really sold me on this being a Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah, put a fucking shirt on, Magic Mike.
A pluses, all around. I was already on board for a sequel, but now I literally just want to see how they interpret and bring to life the looks of more characters. And our final super broad category, overall movie quality. Although I will break it down a bit further into things like story and kind of just other, and giving characters a bit more of their own section. Did anyone actually attend or rent this movie expecting anything incredible from the story? The games have always been silly. Characters punch each other to death, wizardry and superpowers. Some of them get turned into zombies. There are all sorts of apocalyptic events and time resets. It's damn good fun to follow along with, but the series has never taken itself too seriously, even in the more mature games. And that's absolutely for the best. That's kind of what the games have always been about. There's room for a bit of camp in Mortal Kombat, and this movie played it really straight. In a sense, this movie may have had a stronger story than the 1995 movie, only because that one was so simplistic. The tournament is happening, the heroes fight in the tournament, the heroes win the tournament. You know, that's part of why it worked. Keep it simple, stupid. So I'm trying to give this movie credit for doing something new and interesting. Outworld is cheating, with the Sub-Zero and Scorpion rivalry B-plot. That's great. Although I wish the latter had been paid more attention throughout, or was, the central plot. But I've already talked about that. I digress. My biggest gripe with the story is how often this movie stumbles in its pacing and seemingly avoids the more interesting version of events. I already talked about how the team assembly was handled rather poorly, but it at least moved the plot along quickly. My main example is the middle section of the movie with the training grounds. Once they're there, Sub-Zero attacks them before they're ready. That's cool. But then Raiden puts up a shield and tells them all to leave. And they do. Then the heroes spend like 20 minutes training in a strange, drawn-out montage that's both too long but doesn't really show us anything meaningful, and it's basically the exact opposite of what I wanted to see from all this. And side note, why didn't Raiden already have a shield up if that was an option? He's had a lot of years to learn not to trust Outworld. In general, Raiden is largely absent and pretty useless in this movie. I would have loved to have seen more from him. It would especially make sense for him to be more hands-on, to help get the heroes up to snuff with their enemies actively cheating. This training segment is also home to the strangest choice of the whole movie. Characters of the Mortal Kombat series have all sorts of badass powers. I don't really need to know why. The mainline series waited nearly 20 years to bother explaining where Johnny gets his shadow abilities from, and I don't know if anyone was really thinking, oh, finally, when they got around to explaining it. That sort of fading jump kick was iconic before we knew its origin. This movie chose to make it a core focus and, quote, struggle for each character, but also kinda did nothing with it. Liu Kang and Kung Lao already have their fire and hat arcanas, the movie's name for them. I kind of think Kung Lao's arcana is that he teleports in and out of a hat, so I don't know what else it would be. And in their training, they want the other champions to find theirs. I don't immediately hate this plot point, but they rush through it with everyone earning their arcanas pretty well the first time they try, and they choose to explain everything through this. Like, they give Jax the worst excuse for prosthetic arms possible. Like, they made these things out of connects and then just called it good. Then his arcana just magically unlocks and somehow turns them into super arms? What the hell is that? What would have happened if he still had human arms when he unlocked his arcana? Why had he never done it earlier in his life? What was special about now? Kano earns his laser eye when he yells really loudly.
And pass me a fucking intro!
I guess it's that he discovered his true self, but I think the whole point of Kano is that he kind of knows who he is. So getting his superpower wasn't even through any real struggle or even effort. It's so insignificant that Sonya earns hers off screen. Again, doing what? Who knows? Cole is the only one who earns his power in a meaningful way, and he's just trying to protect his family and, not die. And for that reason, his arcana is literal plot armor. What? It's so stupid. All of this so easily could have been stripped from the plot, or drawn out across the entire movie so there's many arcs being fulfilled for every character. Have Kano discover his during the reptile fight, and then they find out what it is and why later, and then he gets to be a big cocky a-hole about the fact that he earned his first. I mean, that's already how they played it in the movie, but then he really gets to milk it. Instead, they build up how difficult these will be to achieve, and then it's totally resolved within like 15 minutes of the movie runtime, and I don't know, 1 day of the in-movie time. How am I supposed to care at all about that? The soundtrack is okay. It's pretty one note. It had a lot of pounding drums and low drawn out Inception horns. It feels like it belongs in a generic popcorn flick blockbuster like Transformers, and I think that's kind of what they were going for. There were a few brief moments where it tried to mix it up a bit, and those were probably the most standout moments, but the only thing I really remember was the one short homage to the iconic 1995 theme. Maybe I'll like it more with time. It's hard to picture fights in this series taking place with anything other than that crazy techno rave music. But yeah, I thought it was pretty meh. Now, at least I'm ending this video on an overall positive note. As was the case with the 1995 movie, the casting and characters are probably the best thing this has going for it. It absolutely suffers, though, in that the least interesting character is the one with the most significant amount of screen time, and yet we still learn nothing about him. Why do adaptations always insist on giving us this relatable character? As if the entire point of video games isn't to put you in the direct shoes of these other characters. We are used to experiencing Mortal Kombat through the eyes of characters like Liu Kang. That's actually a more accessible entry point for us. It's just frustrating. Cole leaves his family with little warning, comes back, leaves again immediately, all of this for who knows how long, or with what dangers he's possibly about to face, and each time his family is just kind of like, alright, okay, bye, see you later. Why make a unique character and do nothing to build them up or make them worth rooting for? There was this popular theory leading up to the movie that Cole Young was going to be Sub-Zero's brother, and that Cole Young was like this really westernized version of that name. That was pretty intriguing. But what I would have liked to have seen even more is some sort of reimagining of Takeda, Scorpion's protege. You could even just make that character an ancestor instead who houses the vengeful spirit of Scorpion. Like, why overthink this? There was ways to root it in the actual game lore that would definitely benefit your storytelling long term. I like Louis Tan. He did his absolute best here. I honestly think he still could have worked as the main protagonist. He's definitely likable enough, but they give him almost no personality to work with, and the only things we know about him that make him unique are that he's an MMA fighter, a family man, and nothing else that establishes traits that matter in the end, so it's all just pointless. Instead, let's look at the characters that did work, which is luckily everyone else. At least the casting was always strong, utilization is a different story, so I'll just say this up top as it applies to everyone, except Kano, maybe Sonya, nobody has enough screen time to establish them in any meaningful way. So in general, this cast is wasted and probably should have started out smaller. I'll take a look at them each in their order of introduction. I have nothing more to say about Scorpion and Sub-Zero. They were perfect, they were the best fighters and actors. More please. Raiden shows up at the end of the prologue, so I'll include that here. Christopher Lambert as Raiden was a treat in the strangest possible way, but it was obvious that would never be recreated, and I don't think any of us wanted to see them try. Tadanobu Asano carries himself so well through this role. He's so quietly authoritative. I kind of wish his eyes weren't perpetually glowing. While it looks very cool, I think it took away from the ability for them to really emote in many ways, and there was clearly so much room for them to fill the role of the glue for this group. It's kind of confusing the way Kung Lao and Liu Kang really step into that. Instead of making Raiden feel mysterious, it kind of just makes him seem unimportant. I had never seen Mehcad Brooks before, but I instantly love this guy. Back when I did my fan casting video, I really struggled with this one. But this guy was unreal. He's so damn built that his actual arms might somehow be more intimidating than the eventual robo arms they suit him up with. Plus, this guy is charismatic as fuck, and probably should have been promoted to a more prominent role. Instead, he spends most of the movie out of commission laying on a slab, and when he does come back, he has like 2 lines of dialogue. It's so strange for a movie to have a problem of clearly having too big of an ensemble, when there's also so obviously like 3 or 4 actors that, both from an adaptation perspective and from an acting perspective, should have been doing the heavy lifting. And yeah, this guy obviously does a lot of heavy lifting. Shang Tsung is pretty cool. I dig his vibe, the way he slinks into scenes through his smoke cloud. The special effects surrounding him all work well, but he really doesn't have a lot to do in this movie. He really drips every line with gravitas, and maybe oversells it a bit.
Winning Mortal Kombat cannot be left to chance.
He's another one of the most significant characters that feels drowned out by the overinflated ensemble. And because they didn't have time to give him any real focus, it makes me wonder if they should have receded him further into the background as more of a sequel build-up, just teasing him instead and having Sub-Zero as the main villain throughout. Then in the sequel, he'd be pleading ignorance like, "Oh, were my boys cheating? I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I'm fair. I've just been sitting here waiting for the tournament." I think I kind of would have preferred that. And if he was less present, it would make more sense that Raiden was less present. And generally, in no small way, I kind of wish they simply brought back Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa. Melina looks neat, but she isn't a real character. Really, none of the villains are, I'll say it now. Even Sub-Zero has nothing to do outside of the early movie. Maybe that's part of why the threats in this movie were so underwhelming. All of them just kind of felt like fatality fodder, and that was where they ended up. I really dug Jessica McNamee in The Meg, so I assumed she would do something really cool with a more substantial role. And I think she clearly fits this role well. She is entirely relegated to an exposition machine. She teaches Cole some stuff and, fights Kano a few times. That's about it. And if you're gonna give the character just nothing of any real substance, then why not cast someone who's primarily a stunt actor or martial artist, and then really utilize them for some standout fights. There's no point having a high caliber actor if you're not going to get them to act. Finally, I can talk about Kano, a clear standout of the movie, someone who in many ways carried the entire movie.
You fucking beauty.
And the character who by far has the most to say and do. If you told me he had more lines in this movie than Cole, I would believe you. He has like a funny little quip or insert between every other exchange or bit of dialogue that every other character has. I'm sure that rubbed some people the wrong way, but I think this movie needed it, and having that sort of gruff comedic relief fit well and helped it stand out from the 1995 film. Everyone was really concerned that we weren't going to have Johnny Cage in here yucking things up and filling his traditional role as the comedic relief, but Kano totally worked here. It was fun having him hang out with the heroes, and led to a very expected but pretty great backstab and him switching sides. And it's nice that we could feel like we actually knew one of the villains. He was killed in this movie. He's without a doubt returning for a sequel, if or when that happens. They'll probably give him the full-on metal eye now. I know a lot of people complain that dropping F-bombs every sentence doesn't make for good humor, but I disagree. It can be funny when done right. I really think Deadpool 1 did this poorly and Deadpool 2 did it well. You can't just chain together endless swears and call it a joke, but Josh Lawson delivers every fuck with such gusto that I laughed out loud at half of his lines.
Kano what?
Kano, none of your fucking business.
Where is it?
You got a pen? You want to write this down? Get fucked.
There's much to learn.
The fuck?
Plus, it helps that this might be the most genuine depiction of an Australian I've ever seen in a movie. If anything, he doesn't swear enough.
Was that Russian?
Do I sound Russian to you, you fucking idiot?
Trevor Goddard walked so that Lawson could run in this R-rated version of the character. This version lost some of the swagger that Goddard brought to the role, but he's certainly not lacking in that brash overconfidence, and carried that forward in a new way. Ludi Lin is a great casting as Liu Kang. He was wasted, as was the rest of the cast in that Power Rangers movie, so I'm glad to see him in another prominent role like this. Hopefully he gets to be a part of a proper franchise or trilogy this time. He really carries that Robin Shoe torch of being unbelievably jacked. There's a scene where he just kind of flexes muscles I didn't even know existed. It took a while to adjust to his strange energy in this film. He's really lacking that smoldering intensity, and kind of looks like he'd rather, hug and talk about his feelings. I was really expecting him to be more commanding, so it took a minute to get used to, but I think it has the potential to make for a very interesting Liu Kang. There's a strange switch up here, where he seems to be this overly devout mystic rather than a rebel, and kind of tying in Kung Lao here, Liu appears to be looking up to him rather than the usual dynamic of Liu being the champion and Kung Lao being in the shadow of both Liu and the great Kung Lao. I have my suspicions as to why they changed that up. I guess it kind of makes sense to not accidentally have two protagonists. They wanted to really sideline Liu Kang in this movie. But anyways, with Kung Lao, I think he was easily another standout. I really enjoyed Max Wang here. He has this cool confidence, some of the sickest moves, and was pretty well a perfect realization of that character. And while I liked seeing this actor as a leader and his relationship with Liu, it still felt totally strange that they would flip that all around. It's a shame he was killed off, and with so little resistance, I would have liked to have seen more of him. But I assume this is why they flipped his and Liu's dynamic. Now Liu Kang has a legacy to live up to instead, and will be in this position of kind of lacking his mentor in the sequel and having something to prove. If he had instead been the more leader role and been kind of the chosen one, and then they killed off Kung Lao, sure, having his protege might motivate him, but they're setting themselves up well for a sequel here. I'm just starting to see the pieces falling into place, that Liu would probably step up in the next movie. And Cabal was probably the most unexpected highlight of this movie. I do not care about this character. I've always thought their costume was stupid, his hook thingies are goofy, I don't really know what his deal is, never really cared, Black Dragon, yada yada, not for me. But they made his costume hardcore, all his skills and moves look super rad on screen, and he just had this chaos energy that I really liked. Am I a Cabal main now? His Brooklyn accent caught me off guard.
You got a big mouth for someone who's standing on the wrong side of the electric fence, tough guy.
I was waiting for him to start talking about ordering a pizza or complaining about the Yankees or something, but the more I heard it, the more it stood out in a good way. I felt like that sort of choice would have totally updated the character if this movie came out 20 years ago. That was something special that the 1995 movie did because everything was so new. I kind of doubt at this point, with the series running so long, that the video games would retcon anything to now reflect this movie, but I think it was kind of brilliant and interesting, and it's a shame that he's gone. Nobody else in this movie is a real character, with shockingly less to do than a cast of characters who don't have much motivation or much of anything to do. Seriously, there isn't a single character arc in this entire movie. Cole goes from being a pretty crappy MMA fighter who loves his family to a Mortal Kombat fighter who loves his family. Hanzo and Bi-Han play out a revenge arc where nothing changes. Sonya and Jax are good guys and they hate evil and they continue to hate evil. Liu Kang is a fighter who continues to be a fighter, although I guess he doesn't have his friend anymore. It's not really an arc. The closest thing we have to an arc is that Kano is conditionally a good guy and then predictably betrays everyone. But, that's kind of him just playing both sides. I don't think that's an arc. There isn't even a standard hero's journey or anything cookie cutter in there. Cole is mostly reluctant through the whole thing. He's kind of significant to the events, and he's kind of forced into participating a bit more, but with how little mind that's paid and how inconsequential it is, it kind of makes it feel like this movie wasn't really about anything. So some final thoughts. This movie lifts from the video games very directly in terms of costumes, appearance, style, and movesets, especially those fatalities. But but we're left with mostly weak fights, a lot of forgettable things like settings and soundtrack, and a strong cast wasted on also forgettable characters. Funnel all that through a somewhat nonsensical plot that is devoid of story, and we're not left with a lot. Fun? Yes, at times. Worth a laugh? It can be, for sure. Unfortunately, this movie does not take the throne of best video game adaptation, as for me, it isn't even the best Mortal Kombat adaptation. The moments that stand out are easily enough to build a franchise upon, and it still leaves me eagerly waiting what comes next. There's some things that need work, things that need to be stripped away, others tightened up. This movie reeks of potential. It just needs to back up that hard R rating and those big gory moments with some more consistent action sequences, more consequential events, and meaningful character growth and development. So while I'm rather disappointed, I would maybe give it like a 5 out of 10, I would still happily line up to see a sequel. If you've loved the video game series or have any sort of passing nostalgia for it, you should definitely watch this movie. You might even enjoy it as some more generic action blockbuster fare, but for a casual viewer, there's not much here, and for martial arts fans, there's not a lot here. I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say. It seems like opinions have been super split. I want to hear what people liked and disliked about this and whether that matches up with my own take. Maybe you saw value where I didn't. I don't know. I'm very eager to talk more about this series. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.